Hey, I'm Jamey from Stonemaier Games, and I'm really happy to be here today with you on October 23rd, 2024, to talk about, as usual, a variety of topics. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have about really anything. We can talk about anything here for the next hour. And I have a few topics to cover today. Nothing world-changing, but just a few little fun things. And I'll start off with, actually, no, let me wait a little bit. I'll wait a few minutes into the livecast to do the show and tell part. Today's main topics are show and tell, Vantage, and BGG at sea, which is one of the questions of the day today. Let me start with maybe something that's less consequential than those things. I guess what I've been playing lately. I have done a lot of play testing recently. So I actually had some of my coworkers over yesterday to play test a potential new game. That was a lot of fun. And Megan was very kind to play test another game that's much further along in the process last week. I did have my virtual game night last Wednesday, and we played Castle Combo for the first time. I really enjoyed Castle Combo on Board Game Arena, and we also played Inside Job, which also I had a great time with that. I had played it previously on the tabletop, and we played, I think, the most streamlined version of it on Board Game Arena, and we played it back-to-back twice. We really enjoyed it. Castle Combo is a game about creating a 3x3 grid, which is actually what Vantage does as well, but in a very different way. In Castle Combo, you're just trying to connect tags or have certain tags that help you discount prices or help you get better rewards at the end of the game, better more points. An Inside Job is a trick-taking game where one player has a hidden role. They are the insider, and you're trying to make sure that that person, whoever they are, doesn't win 4 tricks. So I had a lot of fun playing those games on Board Game Arena. Have you all played anything good on the tabletop or on Board Game Arena or anywhere virtually, any digital version of a game in any game recently? So that's what I've been playing lately. Actually, I had a fairly active outdoor weekend too. I went to a baby shower outdoors. I went to the farmer's market. I played some disc golf and played some pickleball. And in disc golf, I got my 4th ace, which I actually meant to post about that on Instagram today, but I totally forgot. But yeah, it was on basket 18. We played them a little bit out of order, so it wasn't actually the last basket of the day, but it was a true rarity to get an ace in disc golf, which is when you from the tee you throw the disc directly into the basket. It's a pretty tough basket too. It's not far. It's around maybe 220 feet, but it goes through a lot of trees. There are very narrow gaps that you have to hit, and it's just so satisfying and kind of surreal and miraculous to have the disc actually go in the basket off the drive. So I'm still on a high from hitting that ace this past weekend. Garrett says that he played Andromeda's Edge for the first time last week. It was a beast, and we stumbled through the rules a bit, but overall loved it, and I'm looking forward to round 2. That's awesome, Garrett. That's one that I'm looking forward to maybe playing at a convention sometime when I have a lot of time and can just enjoy the play. See it. Yes, other people are posting games. I can hear Walter right now. Walter is licking the couch right now. Walter? Yeah, me yelling at him won't help. Thanks, Adrian. I should clarify, it wasn't 4 aces in one day. I know I didn't say that, but yeah, 4 aces overall in the last, 4 years of disc golf, playing almost every weekend. But yeah, it feels good. And Josh was right. Ace is ace, no matter the distance. I see someone else has gotten into disc golf. V Deviceable says, congrats on the ace. My 7-year-old has just gotten into disc golf. We played every evening for the past 2 weeks. Every evening. That's awesome. I hope you all are having fun. Have you played with any of the Stonemaier discs that we make? We just sent 4 new discs. So we're planning ahead for all of our, many new products for 2025. Now that we have 5 new games coming out next year, I think one of them is not a new game. Yeah, we sent some discs to Innova for printing recently. See some other people talking about possible aces or near aces. Michael says he's been playing a lot of Stamp Swap. That's awesome, Michael. I'm glad you're having fun with Stamp Swap. More Tapestry for Adam, and Garrett's hoping to get an ace someday. Let me do the show and tell part of today. I have a lot of visuals to share. Let me start with one of my favorites, probably the most sentimental. Actually, no, they're all my favorites in different ways. But a person reached out to me on Instagram recently and asked me to film like a quick, I think it was a birthday message for a friend of his. which I'm always happy to do. People contact me about that. I prefer for them to email me, not on Instagram, but totally fine that he contacted me on Instagram. And I filmed a quick video, and he said, well, thank you so much. And to thank you, I'd love to send you an illustration. I'm an artist. I'd love to send you an illustration of your cat, Biddy. I think he was aware that Biddy had passed away. And so I just got this in the mail from Cyrus. This is a little kind of it looks a little bit like the size of a card. It is the size of a card. It's by Cyrus Surecat. Here you can see Cyrus's information. But Cyrus, thank you so much for this. This is lovely. I've had it on my desk ever since I received it, and it's just wonderful to look down and see Biddy and his big eyes looking up at me. So thank you so much, Cyrus. Also sent to me, I think maybe one Stonemaier ambassador has gotten into pottery recently because I believe this is from Joshua, sent me this giant Stonemaier mug. It's so big that I might need to use it for something other than drinking coffee, maybe putting flowers in it or something like that. But this is a Stonemaier Games mug that Joshua sent me. And then from Essenspiel, I have some things from Monster Couch, who makes Wingspan Digital. They sent me a PS5 copy of the Wingspan Special Edition, which they realized recently doesn't actually include one of the DLCs, which was a mistake. One of the downsides, I think, of making a physical version of a digital game. But I don't have a PS5, but they sent me it just to show me what it looked like. And they also sent me, I also don't have a record player, so can't really use this, but I love the art on it. They sent me the record they made of the soundtrack for Wingspan. This is from Monster Couch as well. So thank you to Monster Couch for doing that. That was very kind. And thank you to Cyrus and Joshua for those show and tell items today. Vita says their kiddo has his eyes on a glow-in-the-dark disc. Have you ever considered making any of the Stonemaier disc glow? You know, we should. We should have a glow-in-the-dark disc. Maybe the next one that we make will be a glow-in-the-dark disc. My friend Miles, who does the art for the discs, he has his own separate line of Red Rising themed discs that he makes, and he did actually recently make some glow-in-the-dark discs. So if you are interested in Red Rising and you like really beautiful discs, check out Miles Bensky. I think it's Miles Bensky Designs, and he has some recent. In fact, I threw his Assassin disc just recently. I had one really good shot with the Assassin, and one not as good shot, but it's a really nice disc. Julio says, just came back from a work trip for a project management workshop. You learned a lot. Have you ever thought about doing sorting, something similar for your team, like public speaking or customer service type? That's interesting. Julio, I do. I encourage, let's see how I want to say it. I encourage and try to support my coworkers in any form of professional development or continuing education that they want to do. A long time ago, we did have a session where we got together as a team and did kind of a visioning session, which was good. It was helpful. And I do love team building activities, but our team is spread out from all over. And I found that I'm glad you got a lot of use out of it. I found that short little burst of camaraderie works really well for my team. We stay, it seems to work best that way. I'll say that. So while it isn't professional development like what you're talking about, which I think is great, the thing that we've gotten into the habit of doing is we meet up for about 20 minutes every Monday, just for a quick team check-in. It's a virtual check-in, and it's not required. If you're available, you do it. If you're not, you don't have to do it. And we basically share the highlight of our weekend, so a personal aspect, and then we share the big thing that we're working on that week. Which sometimes spins off into other discussions, but it just kind of keeps us lets us know what everyone else is working on and sometimes what people are struggling with or what some people want help with or can provide help with. I know that's very different than what you just said, but we found that is a great team related touch point that we have. Also related to that is I did a blog post on productivity hacks on Monday, where I listed a bunch of things that ambassadors mentioned, that things to help them focus at work, basically a little bit more when they want to focus. I don't always want to focus at work, but usually when I'm at work, when I'm on a task, I want to focus on that task. And I was talking about, the idea came to me because I recently stumbled into something related to having two monitors, which I've had for a while, but a change on the two monitors that has made a really big difference in my focus and productivity. So I did a blog post about that on Monday, and my blog post last Thursday was about a little Essen experiment, an experiment that we tried at Essen, or that Dave and Alex tried and implemented with our team at Essen, involving kind of a secret code word to get a discount at Essen that they implemented on the fly after having the idea on Saturday. And I love how it worked out. Dominic says, will you be tuning into the World Series this weekend? I'll certainly be watching the highlights. I don't really watch baseball, but I am curious about the outcome, and I'll certainly watch the highlights. Highlights are how I watch most sports now. I rarely watch any sport live. Garrett mentions, so this is one of Miles's discs, the chain breaker disc that Miles makes. Yeah, he makes really beautiful discs. Ray mentioned last week that he was going to try. Here, I'll read Ray's comment. He says, as I briefly mentioned, I was playing last week. I was able to play a homebrewed cooperative game of Dune Imperium with my wife, and she is interested enough to try a standard game sometime. The AI ended up being much too hard, but I think I've learned something valuable about using cooperation to teach games, especially ones that might be out of a given player's comfort zone. This came from last week's topic about games that have multiple modes. And after that whole conversation, I don't know if I mentioned this last week, but I was like, oh, okay, maybe I'll do a video about this topic. And then I realized that that I just like a year ago, I filmed a video about games with multiple modes. So there actually is a video on my YouTube channel already about that. I do that all the time. Like I'll have a full conversation topic about a new list that I want to make. And then I realized, oh, I made that list like 3 months ago, which is nice because it already exists. And I can go through the list and be like, oh, yeah, that covers pretty much everything here. Christian says, do you find any work enjoyment lost by trying to optimize your focus and productivity? That's an interesting question, Christian. So far, no. I guess I should say it this way. I try to phrase the question this way too. What's something that helps you focus at work when you want to focus on work? Because I don't always want, like even during my work day, I don't always want to focus on work. Sometimes I want to jump around between multiple tasks, which I know isn't very efficient, but sometimes I want to do that. I like that. I like that feeling sometimes. Sometimes I don't want to focus on work. Sometimes I take intentional breaks. I do a lot of things that aren't work during the workday at times, but when I want to focus, and this was the focus, really the main topic of that blog post, when I want to focus on a certain task and not get distracted or interrupted, that is what I want. That is exactly what I want. I want to stay focused. Being productive during that time isn't exactly what I really want, but staying focused is what I want. And so, yeah, I would say at the times where I really am trying to be intentional about being focused on a task, that is the goal. I want to be focused on it. And that is enjoyable for me, I guess. Yeah. Nicole says, loving your meeting format. My team meets virtually each Monday, and we list a personal win and a work win over the last 7 days. Oh, I like that a lot. That's similar, but I like that you're listing like a win from it. Great positive start. And we learn weekly a bit more about each other. I like that format, Nicole. I might try that sometime in the future to see if people want to mention a win, because usually we're talking about the coming work week instead of the things that we did last week. Yeah, I like that a lot. Julio says, yeah, the workshop had a section on productivity, and then you published your article on productivity and had a lot of the same tips. Oh, that's cool. Nice. Good timing there. I do want to ask, one of the questions of today is about BGG at sea. You can see it in the main topic of the video. Megan and I saw recently that, so Board Game Geek does these, come play a lot of games on a cruise ship and see a different part of the world. I hopefully, a couple times a year. They do these cruises, these gaming cruises. I've never done one. I haven't really been all that interested in cruises in general, but I kind of understand the allure now because it's a moving hotel essentially, where you get to see different things, but you also get to play a lot of games, which is one of the things I like to do when I'm on vacation. So we saw one. We've already been to the Caribbean. I haven't really been to the Mediterranean, so I would definitely consider one of those. But we saw that they're doing one starting in the UK and going to Norway, which is just sounds really beautiful and interesting to me. So I was looking up videos or blog posts about people who had been on BGG at sea, and I couldn't find a lot. And I wanted to get your thoughts. Have you ever done one of these gaming cruises? And what was your experience? Did you enjoy it? Would you recommend it? How was it? Yeah, I'd love to hear any of your thoughts about that. Or even if you haven't been, but you have thoughts about it, or if you've heard things, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments as we consider going to the BGG at Sea, which is next July in Norway. We do currently have actually another conflict, so it currently is not going to happen. But if that scheduling conflict changes, then we might consider it. And at worst, we might consider it in the future too, if people speak positively about it. Dominic says, Tim says, have you heard of Cubed Next Level Dominoes? I backed the game 2 years ago and never received it. They've had a number of campaigns since, but I've never seen anyone who got their game. I haven't heard of that, Tim. And it's actually surprising that the crowdfunding platforms have allowed them to continue to put new projects on there, even though they haven't delivered. Might be something to tell Kickstarter about if it is a Kickstarter project. I haven't heard of it. Mr. Burt5 says, are there moments that stood out when you realized that games like Viticulture Scythe or Wingspan were not only popular, but were making a significant lasting impact or splash on the hobby? That's an interesting question. I've tried for any of our games, even the ones that have sold, between the three of those games, they've sold around 3 million copies, which is a lot. But there are so many more games sold than that. So I guess I try not to get a big head about it and think that our games are important in any way, more important in any way than other games out there on the market, because there are so many wonderful games that have brought joy to people in such a wide variety of ways. Now, if you went back to me 12 years ago and said, Jamey, you're still going to be reprinting Viticulture a few times a year, 12 years in the future, I would find that hard to believe. Not because I didn't believe in Viticulture, but just because that seemed, 12 years is a really long time to be continually printing a game. Or if you said that Scythe would do what it did for Stonemaier Games, or that Wingspan would reach so many people outside of the hobby even, those would all be surprises to me. So are there moments that stood out when I realized games like that? I wouldn't say it's singular moments, no, but every now and then when I think about it, I'm like, wow, that's pretty cool. And I'm just happy that that they continue to bring joy to people. George says, BGG at Sea combines our favorite pastime with our favorite way to see the world. He hasn't done it, but he would if it was on a Holland America line. We have enjoyed their service the most. I think this is a Royal Caribbean line, if I can get this correct, even though they're in Norway. I believe that. What else? Oh, today I do have a Rolling Realms live play. If you want to join me for Rolling Realms, we're playing through, I think today is Scythe, Honorum, and Parks. I think these are the 3 realms that I'm playing today at 3 o'clock St. Louis time. If you want to join me for that on YouTube, I'll also post the link on the Rolling Realms Facebook group later today. Also, lately I've been reviewing. I've talked about some playtests that I've been running, but also I've been getting a lot of playtest data back about other games that we're working on, or other products that we're working on, and that's been really helpful to review. I really appreciate our entire playtesting team. They are truly amazing in the way that they play these unpublished games that still need a lot of work and offer me great feedback on them. Seba F says, hey, Jamey, is there a method you follow for checking out if the idea or prototype you're working on already exists besides the usual Google and BGG search? That's a great question. That's a fantastic question. I think you're starting in the right place. Absolutely. I using Google and the advanced search function on Board Game Geek is very helpful. The 2 other methods I would recommend are, one, I would recommend going to one of the game design Facebook groups and posting a few notes about the idea. I know it's tough to think, okay, someone else is going to run with this idea and make it happen. But I just don't. I have a whole blog post about this. Like, having an idea is such a small part of the process of creating a game that I think it is worth the very small risk that someone runs with it and actually designs a better game than what you've already worked on. So I think it is worth putting out there and saying, hey, I'm working on a game like this. It has this mechanical hook. It has this thematic hook. Are there any other games like this? Or you could even phrase it in a more positive way where you can say, what are some other games that I should research like this as I'm working on this game? That's one way to do it. So put it out there publicly, see what people say. The other thing to do, and the thing that I try to do, is I follow a lot of board gaming podcasts and blogs and YouTube channels. I consume a lot of gaming content. I check Board Game Geek multiple times a day to learn what people are talking about there. And I know that is a big process, especially if you're newer into gaming. But I think it's worth doing from now on if you haven't started. Follow a lot of content. You can learn a lot about other games, about what people think about other games and different aspects of game design and product design. And along the way, you are learning what is already out there, what already exists. Yeah. So yeah, great question. Really great question. Aaron says, my mom went out to dinner with friends and one of them asked her if there was a board game they can play and drink wine at the same time. My mom immediately responded, viticulture. I love that. Yeah. I usually try to keep the wine to a minimum if I'm teaching viticulture, so people can catch on. But yeah, a little bit of wine is nice. Jeremy says, you mentioned upgraded panorama cards being included in the solo Tokaido pack. What about including the past promos we talked about in there also? Any plans to rewrite the 2-player rules? So 2 questions here. So the pack is already in production. We added panorama cards at the last minute, but no, we're not adding anything else to it. The promo cards, if we make them someday, which I think is likely, we'll probably put in one of the expansions that we print. From what I've heard, they at least there aren't that many promos, and for those that do exist, they are art changes, not mechanical changes. As for plans to rewrite the 2-player rules, no. I mean, I rewrote the rules. I revised the rulebook heavily, but I didn't mechanically change any of the gameplay elements of Tokaido. I think the 2-player rules, I'm really happy with the 2-player rules. So no changes to do that. Edward says, how much time would you say you spend playtesting prototypes each week? It depends on the week. It depends on what other designers are sending to me. Depending on where a game is on the process, or what I'm personally working on as a designer, I would say usually a couple hours. Actually, no, working on prototypes, playtesting the prototypes a couple hours. Working on the prototypes, if I am actively working on revising a game or building a game, that can be much more time. If I'm doing that, that can be, I don't know, 10 to 20 hours if it is one of those weeks where I'm heavily working on either revising or creating a prototype on the computer. Marlene says, how are you feeling today? I'm feeling pretty good. Thank you for asking, Marlene. Do I feel all recovered from the appendectomy? For the most part. I worry about hernia, the risk of a hernia, but abdominal hernia coming through the where they cut me open. But I've been trying to be very careful about that, and I don't think in fact, I probably have put more strain on it than I intended to, like by playing pickleball, and pickleball involves a lot of twisting. Disc golf involves a lot of twisting, but it feels pretty good. Feels pretty good. Marlene says, do you experience seasonal sadness? And if so, how do you manage it? I like that question. Marlene says, with the daylight hours getting shorter here in the Northern Hemisphere, I'm starting to struggle a bit again. I absolutely hear that, Marlene, and I appreciate you sharing that. I've noticed just on our patio at night, it's getting darker so much earlier. Daylight savings will help that a little bit, but yeah. For me, I think it has a pretty subtle impact where I am used to daylight, to it being bright outside until a certain time. And when that doesn't happen, when it starts to get dark so much earlier, it feels like the day is ending earlier, that I have less time in the day. And that I think that affects me in subconscious ways where I don't know if it's anxiety about time, but time is like my most precious resource. I do get anxious about time. And so I think that is connected to it getting darker earlier. But yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. Thanks for asking that question. Valerie has a comment about BGG at sea. She says, my partner and her were considering it, although we are not big cruise people. We prefer land resorts. We tend to play a lot of board games when we are on vacation, so the idea is really cool. I went to the big hot game rooms at Gen Con, and I imagined they would have something similar. And that is, I watched a video about the dice tower at sea, and they did literally they had a meeting room, a pretty big meeting room with around 18 tables set up, and they had their library of games. They brought it onto the cruise ship and set it up in this big conference room. That's Dice Tower Cruise. I don't know if BGG is different, but I'm guessing it's pretty similar. She says, I would also suggest making sure seasickness wouldn't be an issue. I've been told there are great meds for it if it is. On those really, really big cruise ships, you can wear a little patch. That really does make a big difference. But they're so big, the cruise ships, that the impact of the water is pretty subtle compared to a much smaller boat. It is there. You can feel it. It does throw your body off a little bit, but the patches make a huge difference. From my very experience on a much smaller boat. Let's see. Garrett says, playtesting. I was recently asked to sign an NDA in order to playtest from 2 publishers. Is that standard? Is there a reason you don't use them? You know, there is. I just don't like NDAs. I think it's a distrustful thing to lead with, to say, sign this thing so you won't do the thing that we hope you won't do, or that we're asking you not to do. I don't have like a moral or an ethical, I'm not morally or ethically against them, but a red flag goes up whenever someone emails me for the first time. I've never heard from someone and they say, hey, like, I have this thing I want to talk to you about. Will you sign this NDA? I don't know. It rubs me the wrong way a little bit. And so I think for that reason, Garrett, I want to reciprocate trust with the people that I trust. I think I choose the ambassadors who we work with on playtesting. I choose them pretty carefully. And I ask them to not only not talk about the games that they're playtesting, but also to reiterate with their playtest groups, to say, hey, this is a private thing. It's confidential. Please don't share it with other people. And it's been extremely rare that someone has actually talked about it. So like using the implicit threat of legal action against someone talking about it is not what I want. I just don't think that's a good way to start a relationship of any kind. So yeah, I don't know. I don't love them. I understand that for certain business, really big business things like acquisitions, you need an NDA. I think they are pretty important. But for playtesting, let's just keep it a secret. Let's just keep it confidential and trust each other. That's my method. Julio says, I wanted to bring up your Sunday video. Thank you for highlighting the importance of imbalance. It's something I've supported for a long time, and I've always felt like the minority. Thank you, Julio, for saying that. Yeah, this past Sunday's video was called Balance is Boring and also sometimes important. And really the sweet spot I was talking about is that I love games where the game isn't perfectly balanced, especially the different like cards or tiles, whatever you're acquiring in the game isn't perfectly balanced. But they're in that sweet spot of not too unbalanced, but not also too balanced. I think when things are too balanced, it ends up being kind of boring. If things are too imbalanced, then you feel like a player has an unfair advantage or disadvantage. So finding that sweet spot of imbalance, especially when you use methods like card rivers or like in Small World, where you pay coins to get the combination you want. Certain combinations might be a little bit better, or might be situationally better than others. Anyway, thanks, Julio, for saying that. I really enjoyed making that video and talking about it. Thank you for saying that. Ivan says, how do you feel if someone made a connector game between a Stonemaier game and another publisher's game? For example, Viticulture and Vantage. The resource or points from Vantage would be transferred in the connector game, and after that game is done, they would be transferred in Viticulture, making the 3 games kind of a legacy experience. Would you support that, or is it a bad idea? I like the creative thinking here, Ivan. That's certainly a creative idea. I think how would I actually feel? How would I actually feel if I went to Board Game Geek today and I saw a game, and say the game is called Trellis. The game is called Trellis, and nowhere on the box does it talk about Viticulture and Vantage, but it does say somewhere in the rules, if you want to play Trellis with, there's a special way to play Trellis, where if you play Vantage, a game that inspired Trellis, and Viticulture, another game that inspired Trellis, you can play them in this way and do exactly what you described here, Ivan. I wouldn't have a problem with that. I think that would be pretty clever. Now, if I looked through Trellis and I saw that, oh wait, they're using all these icons from Viticulture, and they're using a lot of the same mechanisms as Viticulture, and this is also a winemaking game. We can't protect mechanisms, and I don't really want to protect mechanisms. I think it's good that people can use mechanisms from other games. I do it all the time. I learn a lot from other games. But it being a winemaking game with mechanisms that look really similar to Viticulture, that also have the same icons as Viticulture, I think as you can see, there's a slippery slope that would make me increasingly uncomfortable with the game. But my very first answer, a box with no mention of Viticulture or Vantage, but a variant in the rules saying if you want to connect these games that inspired this game, you can do that in this clever way, unauthorized, unofficial. But yeah, I think that would be. Would I support it? No. Would I be okay with it? Yes. In that case. Yeah. Interesting idea. Hey, Steve says, I'm just now popping in. And one of the questions you asked at the top is if we played any digital games the last week. Oh, we played the Rhinonaxia Kick and found that Llama has an app for iPhone. I need to play Llama. I need to finally play that. So one of the questions of today is about game conventions on cruise ships. If you've ever been on one or ever heard of someone's experience on one of these cruise ship game conventions, because we are somewhat considering the BGG at sea in Norway next summer. Just want to hear your thoughts about that. That's one of the questions. The other question is really just a fun question I wanted to ask today, which is I went to a baby shower for a friend of mine who's expecting a baby in about 6 weeks. And one of the things they did is they asked everyone if they wanted to write down a little bit of parenting advice for them to think about. Maybe something really useful, maybe something funny, and they were going to open them up, I think, during the course of of them being parents, new parents, their first-time parents. And I wanted to see what they invited anyone to answer, because they said either you are a parent or you have had parents, and so you probably have some thoughts about parenting. And I'm curious what you would write down if you have a very short piece of advice that you would give for you as a parent, for parenting advice for you as a parent, or you having had parents. What would you share with a couple who is expecting for the first time? Seba says, what advice would you give someone who is starting in game design regarding when your prototype is ready to present to publishers? Maybe some sort of checklist or minimum requirement. So yeah, that's a good question. I have something like this on one of my videos about pitching to publishers. The two main things I would say are that you have personally playtested, or you have personally / locally playtested the game at least 10 times, and that every time you have iterated and made the game better. 10 times. That's the magic number to aim for. And in addition to that you've coordinated at least one blind playtest using the rule book that you wrote. A blind playtest being where people playtest the game where you are not there to answer questions and that they are learning the game from the rule book itself. The reason that is so important is because the publisher's first impression of the game, if it gets through all their first few filters and they're like, okay, we want to try the game, we want to play it, you get one chance to impress them with that game. And if they can't understand how the game works from the rule book, that's it. That's your one shot. So, yeah, those are the things that I would recommend doing. Those are really the thresholds that will cover pretty much everything. But I would recommend watching the video that I posted about the 4 steps to pitch a game to publishers. That's on our YouTube channel. Steve was talking about travel games. He's going on a cruise next week. That's great, Steve. I hope that goes well and that the games that you bring work out. Let me know how they work out on the cruise. William says, I've never done a cruise before, but if I did a BGG at sea that was traveling to Norway, then I would have to play Scythe, or if I was traveling to any country inspired by Scythe. Oh, I love that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if we do it, we'll have to play as the Nordic faction on the BGG at sea as we go to Norway. Absolutely. Actually, and Albion too is inspired by the United Kingdom. So we'd have to play at least those 2 factions. Stefan says, I am playing a lot of games with my kids, 11 and 14 years old, and I am thinking to involve them in game design, but he's not a game designer. Any suggestions about the idea on where to start? I do have a suggestion there, actually 2. The place I would start is to pick a game that your kids love and have them design a small expansion for that game. I think that's a great way to get started in game design, especially for someone who is younger. But even for someone who's older, it works for that too. The second thing that they can do, and that's similar, is if you have Rolling Realms, if your kids know Rolling Realms and enjoy Rolling Realms, have them design a realm, a promo realm for, just a fan design realm for a game that they love for Rolling Realms. I think this is a great design test. Can you take a game that you love and distill it down to essentially one mechanism that you can explain in just a few lines of text on a card? That's a great design challenge for someone who's experimenting with game design. So yeah, I think one of those 2 things, or both of those things, they are a great way to start to dabble with game design. And after that, I know sometimes you do that and then you you have an idea for your own game that you're more excited about. I get that, and you can work on that too. You can do the two things at the same time. I see some parenting advice start to come in here. That's what Ian is saying. Mean what you say, I think, is Ian's parenting advice. Jeremy recommends Highland's teething tablets, a very specific parenting advice. I like that. Here's one. Let your kids experience failure. They're incredibly resilient, and the lessons of failing, picking yourself up, and starting again are extremely important. I like that. Johnny has an idea. Okay, so Johnny actually does Ivan's idea with two different games, Snake Oil and Telestrations. He says Snake Oil gives us a product to start a round of Telestrations. At the end, you pitch the product using Telestrations as your slide deck. That's really cool. I really, really like that, John. Hey, Steve says his advice for new parents, the book Happiest Baby on the Block was a game changer for him. Ray says, always be ready to sincerely apologize when you are legitimately in the wrong with your child. If you mean it, your child will forgive you and love you even more for it. Well, that's powerful. A statement of vulnerability. I actually think that's great advice for leaders as well, to admit when we make mistakes to our coworkers. Yeah. Peter says, how many copies of a game do you need to sell before it starts making a profit? I imagine that this would vary between games, but wondering if you give any examples. It does vary pretty widely based on games, based on the sunk cost of the art and graphic design that goes into making a game. And I'm not even going to calculate the value of your time. If you have, like, if I'm the lead designer, lead developer of Stonemaier Games, I'm getting paid a salary at least to partially do that. So setting that aside, and even after that, it depends on the game because you have the manufacturing cost and the freight shipping costs. It varies so vastly per game, Peter. I'll give a very rough example. It'll take a little bit of math, but typically I would say for games, we spend around, and graphic design now, our graphic designer is full time. So we're not actually, that cost is divided up a little bit, but say in general, we spend around $35,000 on a game's graphic design and art. Let's add another 5,000 for marketing. So that's 40,000. So that's the main sunk cost that I'll mention here. Sunk cost of $40,000. Let's say it's a game that costs $10 to make and a few dollars. Let's say $10 to make and freight ship. So the landing cost is $10 per game. And we make, well, even just the number of games that you make changes that math. Typically, we make 20,000 copies of a new game. This math, I don't think it's going to help you, Peter, but those are some numbers to think about if you're doing the calculation, because it really depends on how many games that you actually make. But you can run the math on those numbers. Sunk cost of $40,000 and a landed cost of $10 per game. Yeah, you can do the math there to see where the break-even point is. That also doesn't account for other expenses that come later, but you can leave them off for that calculation for now. Things like fulfillment costs. Okay, Kevin says that he's actually going on the Dice Tower cruise again in January. He says, in the past, we've played the ship scenario of Mansions of Madness during a sea day and played Sulkin twice while in Mexico. That's cool that you've played games themed based on where you are, what you're doing. Edward has parenting advice. My advice would be to give each other grace. You will both be low on sleep and irritable. Remember, you are on the same team. I like that. So that isn't so much advice about the child, but also advice about taking care of each other as parents. I really like that. Chad says, my advice as a parent is to know that your patients will be stressed to the limit. The best way is to deal with it. To deal with it is to lean on your mate. Tap out your mate when you see that they're stressing out. Michelle says, is that a Wingspan shirt? It is a Wingspan shirt. Yeah, this is from one of the artists of Wingspan, Natalia. And I'll stress that the artists of the birds in Wingspan are Natalia and Anna. And Anna's sister has helped out a little bit, but it's mainly Natalia and Anna. There was a post recently that was just way off on many different things about the Wingspan fan art pack. And one of the things that they said repeatedly, and they finally corrected it to give them credit, but for a while they didn't correct it, was that they were saying that Beth Sobel, wonderful artist, Beth Sobel, incredible artist, who's done a lot of nature-themed games, he miscredited Beth as the artist of the birds in Wingspan. Beth worked on the background for the box, so the watercolor for the box, and the image used and the background for the goal chart goal board and the background for the player mats in Wingspan. That's what Beth did. Beth didn't do any of the birds. And so if you ever want to give credit to the artist in Wingspan for who illustrated, who spent so much time, literally like 10 to 20 hours per bird in Wingspan, please give that credit to Natalia and Anna because they deserve it. Yeah. And also credit to Beth for speaking up in one of those threads. There was a much more positive thread that came afterward. Beth chimed in and solidified that and clarified that so people could hear from her. I appreciate Beth for doing that. Chet says his other advice for parents is consistency. Mean what you say and say what you mean. Kids thrive on consistency. I love that. I also think that's, as humans, consistency is sometimes harder to do, easier to say to do than actually accomplish. But I love the idea. I love the goal of consistency. Trishul also asked about the bird shirt. He says, I'm curious what the difference is between eagles, hawks, and falcons. This is a peregrine falcon. This is my favorite bird. It's the fastest bird on Earth, maybe the fastest animal on Earth. I believe the fastest animal on Earth, and it is, yeah, my favorite bird. I always try to play it when it comes up in Wingspan. Johnny says his parenting advice. He says social media about parenting will likely increase your anxiety and restrict what you feel like you can do. Trust your gut. You're doing great. You're doing great. You're doing great. I like that, Johnny. Yeah, I think there are a lot of influencers who talk about parenting, but I can see how that would also increase your anxiety. Just like someone said the other day when I posted my blog post about productivity hacks and tips and tricks, that focusing on such tips and tricks can also decrease your productivity because you're trying to puzzle together all these different hacks for being more productive rather than trying to just find the one or two things that work well for you, which I like. I think that's great advice. Julio says he's echoing something as well. He says, they're more resilient and tough than you would expect. He says, I thought I would hurt his child accidentally and that he had to be super delicate, but babies are tough. He trips and gets up. The advice that I gave, if I can remember correctly, I try to be a little cautious about giving advice. I prefer to share my own experience and how that might, so they can interpret that in the way that it impacts them. So I spoke about some things that I liked that my parents did, which was I liked that they were transparent and open about things that could be tough conversation topics that they just from the very beginning were very transparent and open about, like that I was adopted, which is a beautiful life-giving thing that I have in my life that I was adopted. But my parents were never, they were so open about it that it was never a weird thing for me. It was just part of my story, which I really loved about them. I also really appreciated that my parents, they didn't push me to do anything that I really didn't want to do, which I think I don't know if that's always good advice, but the way that they really did it is if I had an interest, if I wanted to go deep into soccer or Japanese or the various things that I fell in love with throughout my life, they encouraged that. They encouraged me to do those things. They didn't push me to do Tiger Mom type things that I really didn't want to do. I think discipline is really important to teach kids. In terms of when they go deep into a topic that they put effort into it. But I wasn't pushed to do things that I really, really didn't want to do, except occasionally eat sauerkraut, which I did not like to do that. I really didn't like sauerkraut. I had one other, I haven't been a parent myself, but I have had, two lovely cats, including Biddy, which I mentioned earlier. An artist sent me this for Biddy. And, what did I give advice about that? I know pets are very different than humans, than babies, but I talked about something. Oh, yes, I talked about more of a revelation that before I had pets, before I had Biddy, I didn't fully understand what it meant to put someone else's needs before your own. Like I understood that concept. I've experienced it a little bit with, friends, family members, things like that. But to really, really feel that with a creature who depends on you, who truly depends on you, and to put their needs before your own, it was a revelation for me. It opened me up to love in a way that I didn't expect or didn't understand or didn't that surprised me. And so I ended with that, and I was like, I really look forward to you experiencing that with your kids. Pepe says, for parenting advice, don't be too hard on yourself. At times, you'll have to remind yourself that you're doing your best and that you can't control everything. I like that. Steve says, we found a class hosted by a doula give us practical tips and tricks. Also, if you're blessed with a helpful spouse, overnight shifts. One can stay up late and the other up early. Good advice. Jeremy says, speaking of advice, have you ever watched YouTube Diary of a CEO? So many interviews with so many experts on different topics. I have not, but I love that recommendation. Let me make a note about that. I'm going to forget if I don't write it down. YouTube Diary of a CEO. I can think of a YouTube channel that's kind of like that. Maybe I just don't know the name. But yeah, I appreciate the recommendation either way. I did mention in the title today about Vantage. So I sent out Vantage's latest update recently, and so I thought I'd go over it briefly today. So in Vantage's latest update, which you can see on our website, it's archived on our website on Board Game Geek and in the Vantage Facebook group. I talk about cooperation this month with a lot of different topics. Why is Vantage cooperative and not competitive? What type of cooperative game is Vantage? Is there AI? No, there's no AI in Vantage. As a cooperative game, and by that I mean there's no AI at all, no AI art or AI generated art, but also you don't have to control an AI for the cooperative elements of Vantage. Is it fully cooperative? Yes. Is there potential for bossy alpha players? I think not. I think that the game is designed around avoiding that. Why do you split the party? A lot of different questions about cooperation. I share some of the challenge dice for the first time and the skill dice that you have over here. And I give, as always in these Vantage updates, I give a gameplay example of what cooperation looks like. So you can read through that. And I mentioned at the end of it, once you read through this example, you'll have even though you don't understand the full details of these mechanisms, you'll have a pretty good idea of how the game works if you read through this example. There's also a great developer journal from Garrett and Travis as they talk about what their involvement in this process looks like. They do this every month. I really appreciate them chiming in. But yeah, if you want to read through this update, too much to read here out loud, but it is a full update about cooperation in Vantage that's available now. I do these updates around once a month. The next one will be in late November. Edward says, what are you reading? Do you read books to help you with game design? I sometimes read business style books, like business/entrepreneurship books. Like right now I have on my desk, I have Give to Grow on my desk, and I'm looking forward to blogging about this at some point in the future. But more often I read fiction. Fiction is what I read at night, both because I like it and because it kind of takes my mind off business. I find that if I read business style books, it really charges up my brain, and I have a trouble sleeping if I do that. So I read fiction at night. Right now I am reading, I just finished Alien Clay from Adrian Tchaikovsky. Really enjoyed that. And I'm reading, I think, the third book in the Dungeon Crawler Carl series. I'm either going to read that. Actually, I am reading that next. And then I have the third book in John Gwynn's kind of Viking-themed fantasy world series. I think it's the end of the trilogy. I'm not sure. It just was released this past week. So that book by John Gwynn is what I'll be reading this week. I can't remember the name of that one. But yeah, I'm pretty sure the next book that I'm just starting to read now is the third book of Dungeon Crawler Carl. Nicole also says that she likes Stephen Bartlett as Diary of a CEO. Great messages and ideas. Awesome. I wonder if there's a podcast version of it too. Podcast, typically if a video is longer than 20 minutes, I almost prefer it in podcast form. I found that just works well with my workout schedule. I usually work out for around 20 minutes a day, and I listen to things at 2 times speed. So that's like a 40-minute podcast right there. So yeah, I will see if they have a podcast version. Joshua says, have you read and enjoyed the Hunger Games series? I have. I've not read the 4th book, but I heard a 5th book is coming next year. So I have read it. I really enjoyed the very first book of the Hunger Games series. And then I enjoyed aspects of book 2 and 3, but the hero of the story became more and more passive. Like a lot of things happened to Katniss rather than Katniss actively doing things. But I gave the 4th book a try. The 4th book is a prequel, and I loved it. I thought the 4th book was really, really good. It still has a little bit of that, but for the most part, you have a very active kind of anti-hero in that you're rooting for most of the book at the heart of the book. So I really enjoyed the 4th book, and so I probably will also read the 5th book. They did a movie based on the 4th book as well. Awesome. Nicole says the Diary of a CEO is on Spotify. That's what I use for podcasts. So thank you. Thanks, Nicole. I'll check that out after I get off. Aaron says, I've probably recommended before, but anyone who is interested in a creative field should read Creativity Inc. by Ed Catmull. Absolutely excellent, fun Pixar case studies. Thank you, Aaron, for sharing that. Yeah, I do have that on my list after you recommended it. I do. And I do actually, on Spotify, they do have books on Spotify now too. So I always look for good books. I'll actually see if Creativity Inc. is on there as a book. What other topics? Am I forgetting anything today? I think I've covered most of what I was going to talk about today. Yeah, if anyone watching this in the future has any thoughts about these topics, parenting was just a fun topic to talk about today, but I really am curious about BGG at sea or any of these game convention cruises. I'm very curious about them. If you're interested in going on one, or if you've been on one in the past, or if you've heard anything about them, let me know in the comments of the video in the future. Ian says, the author John Gwynne, I think it's spelled Gwynne. Let's see if I can pull this up real quick. I'll pull it up on my other screen. John Gwynne. Yeah, here we go. Gwynne. The first book in the series is called The Shadow of the Gods, and the one that was just released, it is a trilogy. This is book 3. Okay, this is awesome. This is the end of the trilogy. Is the Fury of the Gods. The gods in this case being giant monsters inspired by Viking lore. Yeah. Wendy has some parenting advice. Don't kick pets out because a baby comes home. I like that. Raising kids and pets together forms beautiful relationships and teaches compassion and empathy. I love that, Wendy. I really love that. Yeah, I didn't grow up with pets. Not that they were kicked out, but I just didn't grow up with pets. And it would have been really neat to grow up with a pet. I really like that. And I'll echo, Wendy, one of the things that I mentioned, I think, in my advice was that friendships are powerful. Keep maintaining friendships as new parents, I think, are important for you as people and also important for your kids to see. I think it's really important and really powerful for kids to see their parents have friends, that they are robust people outside of just being a parent. Yeah, I think that was always really powerful for me when I saw my parents going out of their way to hang out with their friends, to engage with their friends, to talk with their friends. It was powerful. Sometimes as a kid, I was even jealous of that. And that isn't healthy for me. I should have dealt with that better, I think, as a kid. But I think it was still really powerful and helpful for me to see my parents as more than just parents, and their friendships were a great way for them to do that. Ray says, I can't quite remember if you've specifically talked about this before, and feel free to directly. Did you start seriously designing games while you still had a different full-time job? I did, yes. I had a full-time job when I was designing viticulture. When I published viticulture, really, this changed when well, actually, yeah, there's a blog post about it, Ray. Look for the blog post, Don't Quit Your Day Job, on Stonemaier Games. You'll see the story about this. Don't quit your day job. Ray says, if so, how much time did you devote to game design, and how did you make the time? So the game design time, that varied. But yeah, that varied quite a bit based on if it was a playtest week or not. Usually I would say maybe 5 to 10 hours a week. But once I combined that with actually running a publishing company, or even just running a Kickstarter for it, then it was almost instantly 2 full-time jobs. And that wasn't about game design. That was about running a company to have this Kickstarter campaign and all the stuff that followed after that. At that point, I essentially had 2 full-time jobs. I was spending about 40 hours a week on both of them. So that is something important that I think to keep in mind. If you have a full-time job that you really love, but you want to dabble in the prospect of maybe getting published, that doesn't have to mean that you run a Kickstarter, that you start a company. It can also just mean that you focus on game design and spend, I don't know, 5 to 10 hours a week on playtesting and prototyping and iterating, and just seeing where that takes you. I think that can be a lot more manageable than trying to also run a company in addition to your day job, or even running a crowdfunding campaign in addition to your day job. Ian says that he missed show and tell, so I'll show these again real quick. An artist, Cyrus Surecat, sent this to me, a card for Biddy. Ambassador Joshua sent me this giant mug that he made, a Stonemaier mug. And Monster Couch, who publishes Wingspan Digital, sent me the PS5 version of it, and also a beautiful vinyl album for the Wingspan soundtrack from Wingspan Digital. I think that's all that I have for this week. I really appreciate you all hanging out with me for this hour and talking about these questions, these topics. And yeah, thanks for being here. I really appreciate it. I hope you have a great week. Joshua chimed in the comments to say it's a different Joshua. That's correct, a different Joshua. But yeah, I hope you have a great day and a great week. And yeah, if you have any other stories or comments to share, feel free to do so in the comments of the video on YouTube later. Take care. Bye.